Today we are going to cover three elements that make reading Shakespeare difficult: pronouns and their antecedents, inverted sentences, and metaphors. Complete these activities to practice decoding these Shakespearean stumbles. So first of all, pronouns and antecedents. We talked about this back when we read Beowulf, because knowing who the pronouns refer to is always something tricky in reading. So, for example, in Shakespearean, the words thy and thine are also pronouns. So once you decode them, you also have to figure out who they're talking about. And then we still have regular pronouns like his to figure out. So take a minute in the box to the left and decode these sentences. Use your Shakespeare terms worksheet to translate some of the difficult Shakespearean words, look up some of the difficult vocab, and then think about who do these pronouns refer to. Write a little bit about what you think each quote means. All right, so let's go over them. The first sentence, "The king hath happily received, Macbeth, the news of thy success," translates to, the king has happily received, Macbeth, the news of your success. But then we still have to decode it a little bit. So the king has received news that Macbeth has succeeded. So thy means your, and the your refers to Macbeth. So Macbeth has succeeded in doing something, and the king now knows about it. That's what we know from this statement. The second one is a little harder because it's longer and it's a complicated sentence. When he reads thy personal venture in the rebels' fight, his wonders and his praises do contend, which should be thine or his. This sentence comes after the one above it. So the he refers to the king again. When the king reads your personal venture, which if you looked up venture, it's like adventure, your personal participation in the rebels' fight. His wonders and his praises do contend, which means they are in contest. They are struggling to determine which should be thine or his. So when the king reads about your, Macbeth, when the king read in some kind of letter about Macbeth's personal involvement in the rebels' fight, his wonders and his praises do contend. They are in competition over which praises and which wonders should be yours, Macbeth, or his, the king's. So what's going on in this sentence is that the messenger who is saying this line is explaining that the king has read about Macbeth's involvement in the fight, and he is confused whether the praise should go to Macbeth or to the king himself. And this kind of goes back to the fact that the king is always going to take credit for the overall victory in any kind of battle. But so he's saying Macbeth has done such a good job that he knows he should be praising Macbeth instead of praising himself as the leader. These are important statements because they come up in our reading today. And so now that we've gone over these complex statements, it's going to help you understand the reading. Another difficult thing about reading Shakespeare are inverted sentences. Inverted sentences are just when the sentence is out of order. And Shakespeare does this to maintain iambic pentameter. And so sometimes we have to do quite a bit of rearranging to make sure that they are said in the proper order. And that'll help us make sense of it. For example, he can report, as seemeth by his plight, of the revolt the newest state. This is an incredibly confusing sentence the way it's written, and it's one of the first lines that we'll encounter in our reading today. So first of all, you need to know that he is a captain who shows up at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 2, and the person who sees him coming says, oh, that captain can report the newest state of the revolt. As seemeth by his plight is a parenthetical statement here. His plight means his condition, and it tells you in the introduction that the captain is bleeding, and so this is an injured man. So Malcolm says, it looks like this guy just came from the battle, so he can report what's been going on in the battle. He's obviously been wounded. So to put this in a different order, it seems by his plight, which means his condition, that he can report the newest state of the revolt. So he can tell us the newest situation that's going on the battlefront. And so again, this is a very confusing sentence, but if we rearrange the phrases, then it makes more sense to us. And so all Malcolm is saying here is that it looks like this guy knows what's going on in the battle because he just came from there. Now you give it a try. Over in the box on the left, take a crack at these inverted sentences. How would you write them in normal English order? You don't really have to change any of the words. You just need to change the sequence of the phrases. And you might need to add a comma somewhere, maybe. All right, so to go over these, the first one is pretty easy to turn around. I have not seen a day so foul and fair would be one way to do that. Or you could say, no, I think that's pretty much it. I have not seen a day so foul and fair. The second one, we are sent to give thee from our royal master thanks. So the first thing you have to figure out is, who are you giving thanks to? We are sent to give thanks to thee from our royal master. You could also rearrange it to say, our royal master has sent us to give thee thanks, but you have to change the words a little bit there. Overall, they've been sent to say thank you from the king or the royal master. All right. Probably the most difficult thing about Shakespeare is that he writes in metaphors. He is, after all, a poet at heart, as we know from having read his sonnets. So a lot of times something unusual or confusing will pop up in the reading. You'll be reading, for example, in scene 1 about a battle between two armies. And all of a sudden, the guy telling the story is talking about swimmers or birds or other kinds of animals. And it's really confusing. Like, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about armies. So whenever that happens and you're wondering why all of a sudden something weird pops up, pause and think, wait a minute, I bet that's a metaphor. What is being compared here? And what is Shakespeare trying to convey through using that metaphor? For example, in the scene that we are about to read, the captain telling the story of the battle says that the two sides were as two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art. Spent means tired. So over in the side box, make a guess. What do you think this statement is saying about the battle? How's the battle going if both sides were like two tired swimmers that start clinging together? What happens when you're swimming and you start drowning and you grab a hold of another person who is starting to drown? They are choking their art, which means their skill of swimming. So write in the box, what do you think this metaphor means about how the battle is going? If you wrote that it's not going that well because neither side is winning, then you are correct. The captain is trying to convey that both armies are tired, and so they are not able to keep fighting at their best. Their skill level is down. And so it was really hard to tell who was winning. All right, so now give this a try. These are really hard, guys. So I want you to struggle with this and think about what they might mean. Don't look them up online. I want to see what your thinking is about them. We're going to go over them. This is just practice. So the first one says, just as when the sun begins to rise, shipwrecking storms and direful thunders break, so from that spring where comfort seemed to come, discomfort swells. So just like when the sun rises and suddenly storms pop up, So, from the place where comfort seemed to come, suddenly discomfort swells. Take a minute in the box to the side and make a guess as to what this is saying about the way the battle is going. So, Shakespeare is using the metaphor of sunrise followed by a storm. So, you have to kind of think about the emotions with a sunrise. And my PowerPoint slide kind of has an image that'll help you here. So when the sun starts to rise, we are hopeful for a new day. And so, right when we're experiencing that hope of a new day, all of a sudden a thunderstorm breaks out and the clouds roll in, and we just see, no, it's gonna be a miserable day. So then he restates, just when we thought we would be comforted by a new day, discomfort swells. So at this point in the battle, and you'll get more context when we read the scene, they thought things were going to get better, but as soon as that happened, things got worse. Now there's another metaphor, and this is probably one of the hardest lines in the whole play. I've actually already translated it for you into more modern English. So the king, or I think Donalbain actually asks, did this not dismay our captains? And he actually says, dismayed this not our captains, Macbeth and Banquo? And the captain replies, oh, sure, they were as dismayed as sparrows can dismay eagles, or as hares can dismay a lion. So what I ask you to write in the box right now is, first of all, look up the word dismay, and what does that mean? And then think about, how much are eagles dismayed by sparrows? How much can a hare, which is a rabbit, dismay a lion? And answer in the box, how do the captains feel about this new army coming up against them? Are they dismayed? So if you looked up the word dismayed means disheartened or worried, concerned. So do sparrows concern eagles? No, eagles are a bird of prey. They're not bothered by a little sparrow. Do hares worry a lion? No, a lion is a fierce beast, not to be worried about a tiny rabbit. So, therefore, this metaphor is used to say that Macbeth and Banquo, the captains in this situation, they are the lion, they are the eagle. And this new army they're up against, why, they're just as weak as sparrows and rabbits. All right, so those are the trickiest lines you're going to encounter today. And I hope that going over them before the reading and kind of struggling with the metaphors and inverted sentences will help you to understand the scene. And these continue to be issues as we're reading. So just keep in mind, sometimes you're going to have to rearrange a sentence in your head to make sense of it. And sometimes we're going to have to interpret some metaphors, because the words, the vocabulary, are not the only tricky things about Shakespeare.